The motherboard is the backbone that ties the computer's components together at one spot and allows them to talk to each other. Without it, none of the computer pieces, such as the CPU, GPU, or hard drive, could interact. Total motherboard functionality is necessary for a computer to work well. If your motherboard is on the fritz, expect some big problems. While you don't need to peek inside your computer to look at the motherboard on a regular basis, it's smart to familiarize yourself with the ins and outs of this essential tool. The motherboard will look like a piece of flat cardboard or plastic with lots of metal designs and wires on and around it. Parts of a motherboard include power and data connectors, capacitors, heat sinks, and fans. You may also see screw holes for adding new parts or for anchoring it into a device. Look for expansion slots that may be present for adding on other components later as well. The pieces that plug into it, either with wires or directly, are often called motherboard components. These include optical drives, such as DVD and CD-ROM, video cards and GPUs, sound cards, hard drives, SSD or HDD, processors, CPU, memory sticks, RAM. In short, if a computer uses it to function, it's probably connected to the motherboard so that it can coordinate tasks with other computer parts. Without the motherboard, nothing happens as it should. As with all tech things, motherboards eventually die or become unusable. There are many symptoms of a failing motherboard, and some include peripherals that fail or take a long time to start up, computer powering off unexpectedly, computer not turning on at all, burning or chemical smell coming from your computer. These behaviors can be symptomatic of other, more common PC problems, too. It's best to troubleshoot each solution one by one before assuming it is your motherboard. Even if you think you've ruled everything out, which can be a lengthy process, you should see if your motherboard BIOS may be an issue. Flashing the BIOS could solve the problem and save you the expensive replacement ahead. If you decide to replace your motherboard yourself, you'll need to know the exact model, along with compatible replacement models, before you take the plunge. Motherboards can be extremely difficult to replace in laptops because they are not easy to open or disassemble. The space is also narrow, and one wrong move could damage more than just the motherboard. You'll also need to be prepared to replace more than just the motherboard. Most people find that the CPU, the graphics card, and even the power source have to be swapped out when they get a new motherboard. This isn't a cheap repair. Make sure you've ruled out the other possibilities and then budget for what could be a costly repair to do yourself. In any case, knowing how to find motherboard model information can be helpful for you and your computer pro. You can get this information by checking your computer's documentation, or if you are able to log onto your PC, run a command prompt to find it. To do this, follow these steps. 1. Open the command prompt in Windows by hitting the Windows plus R keys or using the search box in the Start menu to type in CMD. 2. When the command prompt box pops up, type in the following: UMIC baseboard get product manufacturer version serial number. 3. Write down the information or take a screenshot, which should include the serial number as one of the last bits of info on the new line that comes up. You're now armed with the right info for making purchase decisions for any component that needs to be compatible with your motherboard, as well as replacing your motherboard itself with the same model. Most motherboards outlast the rest of the computer parts, assuming they are well maintained. You shouldn't have to do anything to actively care for your motherboard, but being aware of the common motherboard killers can be useful. Things that will prematurely destroy a motherboard include high heat, usually due to inadequate cooling systems and fans. Damage from impact, such as dropping your laptop. Electrical damage, from spills or using incorrect power accessories. Faulty connections or connector types. If you buy your computer from a reputable manufacturer, treat your device well, and only use approved accessories and power devices, you likely won't run into these issues. Each type of motherboard is designed to work with specific types of processors and memory, so they don't work with every processor and type of memory. However, hard drives are mostly universal and work with most motherboards, regardless of the type or brand. Below is a picture of the Asus P580-2E motherboard with labels next to each of its major components. Clicking the image directs you to a larger and more detailed version. A computer motherboard is located inside the computer case and is where most of the parts and computer peripherals connect. With tower computers, the motherboard is on the left or right side of the tower and is the biggest circuit board. Motherboard components. Expansion slots, PCI Express, PCI and AGP, accelerated graphics port. 3-pin case fan connectors. Backplane connectors. Heatsink. 4-pin, P4, power connector. Inductor. Capacitor. CPU socket. North bridge. Screw hole. Memory slot. Super I/O. ATA/IDE disk drive primary connection. 2 4-pin ATX power supply connector. Serial ATA connections. Coin cell battery, CMOS backup battery. RAID, redundant array of independent disks, interface. System panel connectors. FWH, firmware hub. South bridge. Serial port connector. USB, universal serial bus, headers. Jumpers. Integrated circuit. 1394 headers. S/PDIF, Sony and Philips digital interconnect format. CD-in. Older motherboard components. BIOS, basic input/output system. Bus. Cache memory. Chipset. Diode. Dip switches. Electrolytic. Floppy connection. Fuse. Game port and MIDI, musical instrument digital interface, header. Internal speaker. Keyboard controller. LCC, leadless chip carrier. Network header. Obsolete expansion slots, AMR, audio/modem riser, CNR, communication and network riser, EISA, extended ISA, ISA, industry standard architecture, and VESA. Obsolete memory slots, SIM, single inline memory module. Onboard LED, light emitting diode. Parallel port header. PS/2 header. Resistor. RTC, real-time clock. Serial port header. SCSI, small computer system interface. Solenoid. Voltage regulator. VRM, voltage regulator module. Motherboard form factors and types. As computers advanced, so have motherboards. Below is a list of the various motherboard form factors and additional information about each, including ATX, which is the most common. AT, Advanced Technology. ATX, Advanced Technology Extended. Baby AT. BTX, Balanced Technology Extended. DTX. LPX, Low Profile Extension. Full AT. Full ATX. Micro ATX. NLX, New Low Profile Extended. How many connections, ports, or slots are on a motherboard? There's no set standard to how many connections, ports, or expansion slots are on a motherboard. The best method of determining how many connections, ports, or slots are available for your motherboard is to look up the specifications contained in its documentation. If you've lost or discarded your motherboard's documentation, you can often download a free PDF, portable document format, version from the manufacturer's website. Why are the slots and connections different colors? The slots, ports, and connections on a motherboard may be color-coded to help identify the type of slot, port, or connector. For example, with our motherboard picture, the IDE, Integrated Drive Electronics, connectors are different colors to help identify the primary and secondary connectors. When the memory slots are different colors, It indicates the memory slots are dual channel, and pairs of memory should be installed on the same channel, color. For example, in our picture, the yellow memory slots are channel A, and channel B are the black slots. If you were only installing 2 memory sticks, you'd want to install both of them in channel A, yellow slots, for optimal performance. A computer motherboard connects to a desktop computer case using standouts. Once the motherboard is attached to the case, all other devices connect to the motherboard itself or an expansion card. What was the first motherboard? The first motherboard is considered to be one used in the IBM personal computer, released in 1981. At the time, IBM called it a planar instead of a motherboard. The IBM personal computer and the motherboard inside it would set the standard for IBM-compatible computer hardware going forward. Since there is a motherboard, is there a fatherboard? No, there is no such thing as a fatherboard when referring to a computer. However, there is such a thing as a daughterboard. Where did the motherboard get its name? The daughterboards we mentioned in the previous section are circuit boards that all plug into one larger central circuit board, a motherboard. The smaller boards can be thought of as the main board's children, hence the name motherboard. Are Dell, HP, and other OEM motherboards different? Yes, OEM, original equipment manufacturer, motherboards from manufacturers like Dell and HP, Hewlett-Packard, are slightly different than other motherboards you'd find from a retailer. An OEM designs their motherboard for their needs for each model of computer. Some OEMs may even make drastic changes that go beyond the typical motherboard form factor. However, although an OEM motherboard may have its differences, visually they often look similar. Also, if there hasn't been too many changes, it may be possible to replace the OEM motherboard with a retail motherboard. For OEM computers with differences, you'll need a replacement from the OEM or through a third party that sells parts from used computers. Is there a motherboard in a laptop, smartphone, and tablet? Yes, although the board is often called a logic board and not a motherboard. The logic board is similar to a motherboard and operates the same way. However, because of size requirements with most logic boards, components like the processor and RAM, in tablets and smartphones, are soldered onto the board. Also, because many of these devices have no upgrade options, there are no slots or sockets like a traditional computer motherboard. A motherboard is the main printed circuit board, PCB, in a computer. The motherboard is a computer's central communications backbone connectivity point, through which all components and external peripherals connect. Motherboards can be found in virtually all computers, especially desktop and laptop PCs. The components that connect through them include chipsets, central processing units, CPU, and memory. The external peripherals include Wi-Fi, Ethernet, and graphics cards with the graphics processing unit, or GPU. Motherboard manufacturers include Acer, ASRock, Asus, Gigabyte Technology, Intel, and Microstar International. How do motherboards work? The PCB of a large motherboard may include 6 to 14 layers of fiberglass, copper connecting traces and copper planes for power and signal isolation. Other components get added to a motherboard through expansion slots. These include processor sockets, dual inline memory modules, peripheral component interconnect, PCI, PCI Express, PCIe, and solid-state drive M.2 slots, as well as power supply connections. A heatsink and fan manage the heat components such as the CPU generate. Typically motherboards offer additional connectivity through a south bridge chip such as PCI, Serial Advanced Technology Attachment or SATA, Thunderbolt, USB, and other interfaces. The CPU is generally connected to double data rate 3, DDR3, DDR4, DDR5, or onboard LPDDRx RAM and PCIe. This is done through point-to-point interconnects such as HyperTransport, Intel's QuickPath Interconnect and UltraPath Interconnect. Choosing a motherboard often determines many features a computer will support. Motherboard designs in desktop computers typically are the ATX motherboard, which is Intel's improved version of IBM's ET design. Other form factor designers include the following: Extended ATX, Mini ATX, Micro ATX, BTX, Micro BTX, Mini ITX, Micro ITX, Nano ITX. Some memory controllers are now built into CPUs, that has eliminated the North Bridge chips that provided memory management from the motherboard. Integrated video has moved from a motherboard slotted peripheral to graphics-enabled CPUs. AMD's Ryzen has a system-on-a-chip design that also makes the South Bridge chipset optional. This CPU integration has cut motherboard manufacturers' costs. They can offer base systems for workstations and entry-level computers and can design customized implementations for various processors that enable platform upgrades. Gaming motherboards are made for high-performance computers. They are more powerful and have more features than motherboards for desktop and laptop computers. Motherboard components. Each motherboard is designed to support specific components, such as CPUs and memory. They can accommodate most types of hard drives and peripherals. Motherboards include the following primary components: CPU with its logic circuitry that processes the instructions from programs, the operating system and other computer components. Memory where instructions and data are temporarily stored and executed. Storage interface for solid-state or hard disk drive for persistent data and application storage. ROM BIOS providing non-volatile memory that stores firmware, such as the basic input/output system or BIOS. North Bridge chipset that connects CPU, memory, storage, and other components. South Bridge chipset that connects peripheral elements to the motherboard and connects to the North Bridge. Cooling fans that maintain a suitable internal operating temperature. Peripheral connector slots for plug-in peripheral cards, such as graphics and communications adapters. Connectors for peripheral devices such as USB ports and other connectors for external devices. The backup battery that ensures key system configuration data is maintained when main power is unavailable, and the power connector, connecting to an external power source. Many other elements comprise a typical motherboard. Think of a motherboard as a large mosaic of electrical connections linking the various parts of a computer.